evening's platform is given by our own Anne Klaeysen, leader here. Anne is holds a Doctor of Ministry degree in Pastoral Counseling from Hebrew Union College, as well as master's degrees in both German from the State University of New York at Albany and Business Administration. And I dropped we don't want to lose a bit of this. And Business Administration from the New York University. Dr. Klaeysen is the Ethical Humanist Religious Life Advisor at Columbia University and Humanist Chaplain at NYU. She's also the co-dean of the Humanist Institute, and she serves on the board of the Sunday Assembly here in New York. Now, Dr. Klaeysen also participates in several interfaith social justice coalitions, so we know our Anne is very busy, but she's here with a message for us today.
Thank you. And Richard also got his D-Min from Hebrew Union College. We're together on that. Great. Okay. Well, I want to thank you very much for the selection of song. I love Ours is a Simple Faith, and ours is indeed a simple faith. And it doesn't require a whole lot of us except to be our authentic selves and to connect with others in community and to put ethics at the center of our lives. That's not much, right? I was so happy to hear from our children, too, and to hear the ways in which they acknowledged the indigenous peoples who were here before us. On the third Thursday of every month, we co-host a social with the American Indian Community House. And I wish that you would come because it is a wonderful celebration. And this past Thursday was particularly inspiring because November is Indigenous Peoples Month. And so there was just an air of great celebration. And as Dipali said, this can also be a time of mourning for people, and certainly for indigenous peoples who are still not totally recognized, whose treaties have never been recognized, and who still struggle and have so very, very much to teach us. So I'm putting in a plug for third Thursdays, and we are now meeting in Social Hall, which gives us a little bit more room to spread out. So there is a drumming circle and dancing and a communication circle where we share our stories. So I'm just very proud that this community is partnering with the American Indian Community House, particularly in this month. My opening poem today, this Sunday, is from Wendell Berry. We clasp the hands of those who go before us and the hands of those who come after us. We enter the little circle of each other's arms and the larger circle of lovers whose hands are joined in a dance, and the larger circle of all creatures passing in and out of life, who move also in a dance, to a music so subtle and vast that no ear hears it, except in fragments. I feel like Lillian and Mary Fur and I kind of conferred on our choices. Of course, they wrote their own, and I'm quoting from Wendell Berry. Well, I believe most of us want to be generous, especially when we become aware of the needs of other people. At our best, we humans draw the circle wider to include everyone. We support family, friends, neighbors, and strangers in myriad ways. But how do we decide what those ways are, how to give and how much to give? What criteria do we apply? How do we measure generosity? Well, together this morning, we're going to explore these questions. At every newcomer reception, and by the way, we will have one on Monday, so I hope that you will let your friends, family, and neighbors know and join us at 7 o'clock on Monday. So at every newcomer reception, I emphasize what I call the 4 T's of membership. And I think you know them and you could probably recite them with me. And they include time, talent, treasure, and training. And I always say that by coming to the membership reception, they're already spending some time with us. And 9 times out of 10, people who show up on a Monday evening have also come to a Sunday platform, a leader lunch discussion, some program that we have going on here. So they already know something about us, and they're interested in learning more. As far as the talent goes, I always tell CPAs, do not feel like you need to be on the finance committee. You probably would rather sing or act in ethics in the theater, so please do that. Because I always feel that there are not only the talents that we bring to the community, but there are also the ones that are part of our growing edge, that we've never been given the opportunity to explore because it's part of our worth and not our value. Right? That distinction that founder Felix Adler makes between worth and distinction. We have inherent worth and dignity. It's who we are as part of our authentic selves. And then we have a kind of value that society puts upon us. And if we're lucky, that value gives us a living wage, right? So that we can put a roof over our heads, food on the table, pay for health, that kind of thing, right? But our worth often is not thoroughly explored, and a community like this can give you that opportunity to realize new talents. The next one is treasure, and that's what this sermon on the amount is going to be about. The last one is training, and I always say it's important to learn more about ethical culture and about humanism so that your friends and family don't think you have joined a cult. Now, of course, if we were a cult, there would be millions of us and not just thousands, because we're very reasonable and rational people. But I think it's important for us to dig deeper into what humanism is all about. And so here's another plug for the Ethical Enrichment Committee. In January, I will be giving a more intense course on humanism. Again, so that we know what our philosophical roots are, and we struggle with it, right? It's always wonderful with any philosophy to say, well, I agree with this, but not so much with this. Or, as Richard told us, putting on different lenses so that we can see more clearly, so we can bring this humanist philosophy, faith, and yes, religion into clearer focus for ourselves. So, it's in those newcomer receptions that we first introduce the notion of fair share giving. And that's the T for treasure part. And what I say to new members, because part of the process is having an interview with me or with Richard, and what we say is the amount that you decide to contribute to this community under our fair share giving plan is the first ethical decision you will be making as a member. And I always emphasize it is personal and it is private. And no one is going to question you about it. Now, for some people, that makes it more difficult. Please, just give me an amount. Just tell me how much does it take to belong? Well, you know what? We did that a few years ago. We had what we called a minimum pledge. And as you may recall, the theme that year was love your society 365 days a year. Yes, $365 was the minimum. Well, what happened? Human nature being what it was, it became, or what it is, it became a maximum for those who well could have afforded more, right? And for those who couldn't, it was embarrassing. It was really embarrassing. Now, we as a community want to make sure that this is the place where we reinforce everyone's worth and dignity. So if not being able to make that amount hurt someone's dignity in some way, then we need to go back and reevaluate it. And that's what we did. So the fair share giving means that you take a look at what your livelihood is, what you have coming in, what your expenses are, and you decide how important this community is to you. And it is my hope that you will put your money where your values are. So that's what I mean about making a commitment, a deep and enduring commitment to a community. Here's a definition of commitment. When you are willing to give your time and energy to something you believe in, or a promise or a firm decision to do something. It's also a strong belief that something is good and you should support it. It's also an enthusiasm for something and a determination to work hard for it. Finally, it's a duty or responsibility that you have accepted. As Alice Morris says, the irony of commitment is that it's deeply liberating. In work, in play, in love. And I imagine that some of you have felt that as well. That when you make a commitment to something and or someone, you feel more complete, fulfilled. A burden is lifted off you because you are free to be your whole authentic self. Now, what's the definition of generosity? It's the quality of being kind, understanding, and not selfish. The quality of being generous, especially the willingness to give and share money and other valuable things to others. It's an act of unselfish giving. As one of my favorite existential philosophers, Albert Camus, says, real generosity toward the future lies in giving all to the present. And I want to emphasize that because too often we see the short term, right? And that is, I'm going to give because of something that may be going on today or tomorrow or maybe next year. But again, like the indigenous people, and we stand, by the way, on the land of the Lenape and the Haudenosaunee. So like them, let us not make any decisions without taking into consideration 7 generations out, and let us be generous enough to support 7 generations out. Surely those first members of the Ethical Culture Society did that when they gave us this beautiful home, this beautiful meeting house, dedicated in 1910, because they had the hope and the faith in future generations that we would continue, that we would be as unselfish as they were. Tom Stoppard, one of my favorite playwrights, says, obviously you would give your life to your children or give them the last biscuit on your plate. But to me, the trick in life is to take that sense of generosity between kin, make it apply to the extended family and to your neighbor, your village, and beyond. Again, making that circle bigger and bigger and bigger to include everyone. Well, why do we give? Let's get back to that question. And we humanists are generous, and we give to causes in quite a spectrum. So our giving pattern is different from more traditional faiths. For example, Mormons who tithe pretty much only give it to the Mormon church. And that is because their tradition is that they will care for everyone within that tribe, right? So you're giving the 10%, but if you are a Mormon, you can be assured that that's your safety net. There it is for you. Evangelical Christians, for the most part, will give only to their church, and they're generous. They don't give to other causes because their purpose in life, what gives their lives meaning, is really in that church, in that belief that they hold. Desmond Tutu refers to the concept in South Africa of Ubuntu, which is the essence of being human. And it speaks to our interconnectedness. You can't be human all by yourself, he says. And when you have this quality, Ubuntu, you are known for your generosity. So I'm going to explore some statistics for you. I mentioned a couple of them, right? The distinction between, say, humanists who give to a number of causes. When we were at our table, giving our money away, I said, well, of course I would give, first of all, to all humanist causes, to the Society, to the American Ethical Union, to the Humanist Institute. And then I paused and I thought, well, and of course Planned Parenthood, and then of course Emily's List, and then of course, and of course, and of course, and of course. So we see that it's difficult when there are so many causes that we want to support and that are so important to us. And I was wondering at our table if, for some of the people I know, if I could guess where their passion lies and imagine to whom or to what they would have chosen to donate their money. And I think I would know for a great number of you because we've had those deep and meaningful conversations. But you see where the pattern is and how that's different from other places. Well, what I found interesting as I look at statistics is the pattern also of income level. So those at either the high or the low end of income distribution tend to give a higher percentage of their income as opposed to those in the middle. Yep, we folks in the middle don't give as much. Now you might understand that we don't give as much as wealthy people do, but as a percentage of our income, we do not give as much as people who are considered poor do. And of course we know that the language, the terminology is interesting, because a family that might statistically fall under the poverty level would not consider themselves poor because it's a pejorative. So they consider themselves working class or lower middle class. Very few people identify themselves as poor. So that's the reality. Households that contribute to religious organizations tend to give more, both in dollars per donation and in percentage of income donated. In both cases, households that give to religious organizations donate about twice as much as households that give to secular organizations. And again, I can give you the footnotes for this, but this comes from the National Center for Charitable Statistics as well as a philanthropy roundtable. So, bottom line here, religious Americans give more. The more important a religion is to a person, the more likely that person is to give to a charity of any kind. And this research has been borne out for several years now. So among Americans who claim a religious affiliation, 65% give to charities. About 75% of people who frequently attend religious services gave to its congregation, and 60% gave to religious charities or non-religious charities. So in general, that's kind of interesting. By comparison, fewer than half of people who said they did not attend faith services regularly supported any charity, even a secular one. So we've got kind of an interesting thing going on here, and I always wonder where we fit, right? Where we fit. Because in a lot of ways, humanists straddle both the religious and the secular worlds, right? There are many humanists who do not identify humanism as their religion. It's their philosophy. It's their worldview. But they may not have the temperament, to embrace it as a religion, or they may have other reasons for that. Nonetheless, I like to lump us in those, who have a faith, and sometimes it's sorely tested in the goodness of humanity. And we embrace that faith in the goodness of humanity. We work hard at practicing our own ethics. And so I like to put us there and hope that we too are as generous. Now, this pattern also differs from other countries, and there are a lot of reasons for that too. And one of them is because of the separation of church and state. Another is that when Americans were first coming here, one of the ways that they organized themselves was in churches and synagogues and mosques. But I think another very important reason for the difference in a giving ratio between Americans and other countries is that certainly, for example, in Europe, there's a safety net there, right? You are guaranteed some living. You are guaranteed childcare if you have a family, and you're guaranteed health. We don't have those guarantees here. And so very often philanthropies, churches, and others have done the job of what in other countries the government does. And so we have to be aware of that as well. It's interesting too, although I think it's intuitive, that people who live in larger areas, urban areas, who may not know other people so well, will not give as high a percentage as people who live in rural areas, in small towns. So in a village like mine, where I grew up, the percentage of giving is much higher than it is in urban centers where people maybe don't know their neighbors. And that makes a lot of sense, because that connection, it's like you know where your money's going. If you're giving it somewhat anonymously, you don't know as much. And so that's a factor that comes into it as well. So I challenge you now to be thinking about the ways in which you give and what those connections are. And if you are giving to people that maybe you don't know, but you know something about the cause. And one thing that we try to do here, and we will do again today, is on Sundays, we share our Sunday collection with another nonprofit. There are a couple of reasons why we do that, and every once in a while we get pushback from some members. And they say, well, we need the money more. Well, Founder Felix Adler said, when he set up this society and others, that every society should donate at least a third of their income to other nonprofits. And one of the reasons he said that, I believe, is because in that first generation, he was founding those institutions, right? He founded the visiting nurse service, the school next door. We co-founded the ACLU, the NAACP, the Children's Study Group, the Committee to End Child Labor, started one of the first Planned Parenthood centers on the Upper West Side. We did all those things. But maybe he knew there would be a time when we might not be founding so many things, but we still had to hold on to that core mission of supporting other nonprofits. And I think that's why he did that. Well, we don't rise to that challenge, but we do share the Sunday collection. And we do that partly to fulfill that hope, that aspiration of Founder Felix Adler's, but also so that you can be aware of all those different organizations. And we try on the Sunday Program Committee to choose organizations that are local, so that you can get to know them and maybe stop in and maybe also volunteer, to raise your awareness about them, and then also when there is a crisis, to say, okay, we're going to take the whole month, and we're just going to put the whole month shared charity into something, whether it's Puerto Rico or it's gun regulations, whatever. It is a way that we can show what we value and hope that other people catch that from us as well. You've probably heard of sociologist Robert Putnam, who wrote about bowling alone, and he's chronicled the many pro-social and philanthropic overflow effects of that practice of giving. Not only is half of all American personal philanthropy and half of all volunteering directly religious in nature, but nearly half of all associational membership in the United States is also church-related. So we still sort of have those links that bring together mutual knowledge, responsibility, and support like no other influence, right? Indeed, faith is as important as basic financial success in increasing giving. For instance, African Americans, who are generally more religious than whites, are consequently give 18% bigger givers when households of the same income, region, education, and so forth are compared. And part of that is because they know that this is where we need to support our community, right? Not only in the basic needs, but also in the needs of voting rights, discrimination, anti-racism. And along those lines, I'm going to put in a pitch for this afternoon. Please join us for SURGE, Stand Up for Racial Justice, which will have a training for us. So that's important as well. So physical separation and economic stratification can corrode social cooperation and generosity, but we can intentionally connect to one another and make those links so that we can experience ourselves and others as being more generous. And here's a quote from a very successful oil businessman. His name is Jim Calloway, and he wrote in the Philanthropy magazine, "I came to realize that expanding my philanthropic activities could be both meaningful and fun. Making a lot of money and spending it on yourself is not a lot of fun," he noted. "What is a lot of fun is to live modestly so that you can give it to the common good. That's where happiness really lies." So that's from a very, very successful man who says, you know, I live modestly. Why would you need anything more than that? Do you really need a diamond-encrusted cell phone? I think not. One might argue we don't need a cell phone at all, but we won't go there. So, in conclusion, and we will have plenty of time around your tables to be discussing answers to these questions and sharing your stories about times that you have given. And even if you don't want to share how much or what percentage of your income, please do share with each other the joy that you felt in being generous, the joy that you felt in that happiness that it gives you. So I'm asking you to stay true to who you are, stay true to the mission of the Ethical Culture Society. Be that community of people who puts ethics at the center of our lives, who live purposely and intentionally, who nurture ethical relationships as a spiritual practice, and who embrace this planet as the only home we will ever know and commit ourselves to its sustainability. And to get back to what seems to be a theme of acknowledging, honoring, respecting, and learning from indigenous nations, I close with a quote from Starhawk. "We are all longing to go home to some place we have never been, a place half remembered and half envisioned, we can only catch glimpses of from time to time. Community. Somewhere there are people to whom we can speak with passion without having the words catch in our throats. Somewhere a circle of hands will open to receive us, eyes will light up as we enter, voices will celebrate us whenever we come into our own power. Community means strength that joins our strength to do the work that needs to be done. Arms to hold us when we falter, a circle of healing, a circle of friends, some place where we can be free." Thank you. I am so proud and so happy to be a part of this community and to look out onto all of you and to know that you are there for me and for each other. So give fairly and give generously.